eventually a test. There's always a test, just so you know. Today, there is a test, but we're not quite ready for it. I was trying to scare you, make you think that my sermon was this long. But you all know better. We're going to talk some more today about the body of Christ. Whose body?
The body of Christ.
The body of Christ. And last week we talked about how we're connected to one another, and I had to reach out and touch somebody. Go ahead, reach out and touch somebody. I have to tell you that I don't usually tell Sheila what songs to sing as a choir, and most of you don't understand that even if I told her what songs to sing, it probably wouldn't happen. Right, Raven? Now, however, she does do really good, and sometimes God moves us in amazing and wonderful ways like today. Because today's song is really helpful to us. And not just the fun one at the beginning, or at the end, but all three of the songs that were included in the medley, and we're going to talk about that. Because those three songs actually were written many years apart, but I will tell you that they could have been written by the same person. Because the message is what was important in those songs. Last week we talked about the connectedness and how we're called to be real. How we're called to be reliable and encouraging and authentic and loving. That being real in every relationship, your relationship with Jesus, with your spouse, with your friends, with your church, is going to make every connection stronger and every friendship grow. But today, I'm going to tell you something. We're going to move past some generic kinds of thoughts about this. Today, we're going to make it personal, and we're going to find out what Paul means about building the church up with our spiritual gifts. Those of you in the Sunday school class, I'd like you to tell the rest of the church in one loud voice the one and sole purpose of spiritual gifts.
Build up the body of the church.
To build up the body. Over and over again, we've been talking about spiritual gifts and the different spiritual gifts in Sunday school. And every single gift is given only for the building up of the body. Now, if that isn't clear enough, let me put it this way. God gives us spiritual gifts to build up the church. Look at a neighbor and say, build up the church.
Build up the church.
Now I know some of you aren't believing me. That happens every Sunday for every preacher. There are people in the crowd that just go, oh, he's crazy. But you know what? I can be crazy, and I often am. But that doesn't mean I'm not right. You see, God does some pretty amazing things, and we saw some of the things that He did yesterday, and we see things in this room, and we see things in the choir, and we see God absolutely move and work within us. And He does it through our gifts. There are things that every single one of us can do to build the church up. If we are real, reliable, encouraging, authentic, and loving. If we are real, then the church is going to be a better place, no matter if God shows up or not. But just imagine this. Just imagine with me for a moment if everyone in the church was not only real, but was also doing what God had designed them for and equipped them for with their spiritual gifts. Imagine with me the lives that would be affected. Imagine with me how people would be flocking to this very place. Because not only are we real, but because God is evident in our lives through our gifts and talents. What do you think would happen in a church, this church, if we were all real? What would happen if the members did what God designed them to do? What do you think would happen? Anybody? What would happen? It'd be a miracle. Now, I don't want to pick on John, but I'm gonna. Isn't what John just said a travesty? To think that it would be a miracle if the person sitting next to you and the person sitting next to you on the other side and the person in between those two people, you all got that, right? The people in between the person on your right and the person on your left. Take your finger and point at your chest, because that's you. Did what God designed us to do. Do you think our world would change? How many think that our world might change if we did what God designed us to do instead of everything else that God didn't design us to do? Now, I know that that sounds harsh, but I think churches and people around us watch us. And they pay attention. And they want to know if people who say they're believers really are believers. Because that's what makes John's comment a travesty. It would be a miracle because none of us believe that it could happen. Now, part of that is because, quite frankly, we haven't always done a good job in the church talking about our spiritual gifts and what those gifts mean. Here's what I think would happen if we all did the things that we were gifted and equipped for by God. I believe that there would be a revolution in the church and in the community around us. I believe that there would be a revolution of growth. I think if we started living according to how God has equipped us to live and gifted us to live, our lives would just expand and expand and expand and expand. Jesus even talked about that. He talked about the leaven and the yeast and how God is like the yeast causing His people to expand and to grow. I believe that there would be not only a revolution of growth, but there would be a revolution of excitement and hope and joy. How many of you need more joy in your life? I'm going to give you a clue. If you need more joy in your life, you're probably not doing what God has equipped you to do. It's really true. Now that sounds really harsh. How many of you think I might be right? I think that if every member and friend of First Christian Church was using their spiritual gifts in a real way, there would be an explosion of love all over Lake County. I don't know about you, but I get pretty excited when I think about seeing love explode all over Lake County. I think there would become truly a sweet, sweet spirit. You know that sweet spirit we sing about the last hymn? I think that if we all lived according to the gifts and talents that God gave us instead of the ones we think we ought to do, I think there would be a real joyous singing of that song. And I doubt if one chorus at the end of worship would be enough. Lives of people around us, next to us, ours, would be changed. is this something that you think that might please God? You think that living according to our gifts and talents as God equipped us would please God? I guarantee you that of all the things that I ask you to raise your hands to today, that one is the most important thing that I'm going to say. Because God is pleased when God's people do God's calling, God's way. Now, we're not perfect at it. Nobody's going to be perfect at it. But using our gifts and talents, using the spiritual gifts that God has equipped us with, using those things that are yes to God, actually prepares us for. That's one of the beautiful things about a spiritual gift. God's not going to give you a spiritual gift if God's not going to give you a place first to use it, and secondly, to be blessed by it. You know, Christy was up here talking about the Allendale Angels, and I'm just going to talk about Christy for a minute because Christy has a special heart. Do any of you know that Christy has a special heart? You know what? Christy has a special heart. She will deny it. She is wrong. Let me tell you about Christy's special heart. You heard her tell her Allendale Angels story. She was in, I'm sure she was in the first group that went out there. She goes. Do you think she goes because she makes $1 million out of Allendale? Do you think she goes because she doesn't have anything better to do on Saturday afternoon or Sunday afternoons that look like this? I get the snow cover, but you see, she goes because I'm going to tell you that one of Christy's spiritual gifts is a servant's heart. And she goes out there every month to serve 14 boys who have been dealt a harsh hand. Do we solve all their problems? No. We don't solve all their problems. But we bring grace and hope and somebody who loves them. Because Christy knows that that's one of her gifts. Maybe she didn't know. She didn't know what to do with this. I can't tell you enough how important and how life-changing our living as the body of Christ by our spiritual gifts truly is. Now, it brings me to a question. What do we have to do to make this happen at First Christian Church? And I'm going to go way back. And I'm going to say, what is the first step in using our gifts at First Christian Church to build up the body of Christ? Does anybody know what the first step has to be? Willpower? No. Prayer? Well, I'm hoping we're praying about it, but that really isn't even, I mean, prayer should happen before, but there's surrender. Oh, I like that. What are we going to surrender to? God and the gift. The problem, I think, in most churches is that we go through life. Oh, we go through it together, but we go through without knowing what the gift is. Without knowing what our gift is. And then, I think Maureen was partially right. Sometimes we figure out what our gift is and we go, no way, not doing it. because it scares us to death. But let me tell you something about the gift that God has given you. God has given you a gift, and because He's given you that gift or gifts, God will see your use of that gift through. In other words, you could be like Moses and say, God, I don't want to talk to Pharaoh. I stutter. But God saw Moses through. And God will see us through. You see, our spiritual gifts will change our world. How many today think that knowing what your spiritual gift might be important? Many of you think that it might be important. That's why there's a test. I need some help. Step up here and help me. Christy. Everybody needs one. Here, you can have 2 stacks. You have to cover that whole side. I just rolled with it. If we run out and need more, oh, thank you, Raven, for helping. Spread them out. Christy's over here doing this side all by herself. Here's the first thing you're supposed to do with these. You've got some coming down. You're supposed to put your name on the top. By the way, this is graded. Guys back here at the music booth, are you ready when I tell you? You push play, but not yet. Okay, put your name at the top. What goes at the top?
Name.
Your name. And it should be the page that says test. Or, whoops, Betty needs one. How do we skip? I know, it doesn't say. This is really an inventory. What's that? Okay, sorry. If you, just so you know, this is not really a test. It's an inventory. Does everybody have one? Hold it up if you have it. Everybody have it? Hold it up. Okay. Now, I know some of you skipped ahead, but at the very top where it says Spiritual Gifts Inventory, you put your name. Sitting right here at the top. Your name, not mine. For example, Barb will put Barb Raymond. Yes. Now, second, we're going to take some very precious time to do the survey. Guys at the sound booth, do you have a survey? Oh, good. Okay. It's very simple. You're going to put a number in the column on the line next to each one. Sorry, hold on. I need to put my glasses on so I can give you the right directions. You just check. You don't even have to think, you just put a check. If the statement is true about you, you check it. For example, if you read the first one, I prefer ministering by myself rather than in a group. If that's you, you put a check mark by there. If that's not you, don't put a check. So when the music's playing, I want you to do the checks. You don't have to do the math at the bottom. All you're going to do is the check marks. Alright? So guys, we need 5 minutes or until I tell you of music. Play.